Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the third edition of the Economic Times Global Business Summit. Let me give you a very short introduction to the event. The third edition of the Global Business Summit, like the first two gatherings, brings together the best and brightest from India and abroad on stage and in the audience. As in the first two editions of GBS, some of the world's best-known CEOs, management gurus, economists, and thinkers will address this select audience. I'd now like to invite on stage Mr. Rana Kapoor, founder and CEO of Yes Bank, to deliver the special address this evening. Mr. Kapoor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank very much our friend Vineet Jain, ET Group, as always, for this fantastic organization. So I would like to share what I think is a little bit of a stock take in what is happening in the economy. The foremost point I want to make is I think the idea of India is intact. What do I mean by idea? The idea is fundamentally the I. I is about the international, because this is the global forum, it's about the international trade and commercial exchanges which are being promoted by the government of India, personally spearheaded by none other than the Prime Minister, who is branding India as a destination to come to and to invest into. So that's the first I. The D, in my opinion, has a lot to do with the domestic reforms. We had some breaks, we had some speed breakers, but I must confess the last 18 months or so of the last 36 months of the government have been somewhat more encouraging. And the domestic reforms are falling in place, not really in high jumps and long jumps, but very steadily coming together. And that, I think, is building the confidence and conviction in the economy. I think the third point, the E, idea as in E, is the ease of doing business. The ease of doing business, ladies and gentlemen, is not just about Delhi. It's about, as has been said politically and economically, and also matters a lot to the bankers, is the cooperative federalism. The angle of the state governments and how they are responding to the changes and how they are competing with each other to bring in and solicit investments. To me, the E is extremely important, not just at a Delhi level, at a federal level, but mostly at a cooperative federalism level, at the state level. And I think the states are competing, the amount of roadshows they're doing, but apart from that, some of them mean serious business. For example, the state of Andhra Pradesh, which is so voracious about its appetite for investments. And I think the A in the idea is a lot to do with the active, somewhat belatedly, the active consensus building process which is underway. I don't want to elaborate on this point. India is still, ladies and gentlemen, the fastest growing economy in the world, with whatever blips we continue to have here and there, but still the fastest growing economy in the world, continues to retain its top spot as the #1 economy. But if you look at some key factors why, I only have a few points in this respect from a banker's standpoint. First and foremost, the improved macroeconomic stability. I think we must recognize that the low inflation and the fiscal prudence, and that coupled has been a game changer. We never had a situation, most of the time we've had conflicts on that front, but I must confess that there has been reasonable convergence in terms of inflation management, fiscal prudence, and more recently steps like the Monetary Policy Committee, which means that there is consensus building coming together in terms of inflation management in our economy. The second point, in my opinion, very important, is that the government has not been leaning towards what I call unaffordable populism. That means we are not wasting a lot of money on what is populistic. And I would like to believe that this is very significant in the overall appetite that investors, FDI investors, FII investors, domestic investors, which have been languishing as they regain their animal spirits and all, when they can build and understand that there is an angle to all of this. So the government is not into anti-populism. I think this is something I would like to underscore more than once. Other point which I think was hesitating and somewhat in debate for a long time is, ladies and gentlemen, the reform momentum. I think the reform momentum in our country is, I've been in the business of banking for 37 years, has been pushed forward. The push forward has a lot to do not just with tectonic reforms, which have been pending for decades, like GST, or for that matter, the insolvency and the bankruptcy code, IBC, and then the amendments required to build more teeth into implementing those bills. But the fact is that the reform process and the deregulation process are moving hand in glove, slow and steady. And I think that is a very important point. And to me, the other thing, the growth multipliers, I wish I would be happier if they were divided into short, medium, long, but most of them have angles which are more medium to long, such as smart cities, such as Make in India, Startup India, Digital India, and so on and so forth. These are visionary tactics. And I think these tactics, when given a chance to consummate, will make a very big difference. They are right now in different gears, first, second, whatever, third gear, but they are being digested by our system, by India's human system, India's little DNA, to understand that we have to move forward and not just live in catching up with the past. I'll speak a little bit about me as Yes Bank, as the sponsor of this very important Global Business Summit. Vineet Jain gave me this opportunity, and I, happily accepted. And all I can say is that the opportunity is driven by what I call the principle of art. Art. Art for me stands for alliances, relationships driven by technology. So I could go on, but India's globalization is really around the corner. And we will talk about the Yes Bank Innovation Garage, which I'm setting up in my headquarters in Bombay, the first of its kind in Indian banking, where people don't need to go to Silicon Valley for banking cutting-edge products. They need to come to Mumbai, Lower Parel Innovation District, which I'm creating there. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, recall that much used phrase, the new normal. The problem with that phrase is that it no longer describes some of the most important changes around us, whether in economics or politics. What we have now is the new abnormal. And telling us how to navigate through these disruptive changes will be a star panel of corporate leaders and thinkers whom I'd now like to invite on stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the panelists. Without much ado, may I venture into debating and discussing what really is happening in the world today? Is it growing protectionism? Is that what we're going to get used to? Are we going to get used to more barriers? Trade wars maybe, WTO disputes. May I ask Rick Lesser? Rick, you've been meeting with a lot of global CEOs. You know what's happening in America. You probably are also very familiar with what's happening in what may happen to President Trump's policies, given what we saw a couple of days ago. So can I just ask you, are we looking at more trade wars? Are we looking at more protectionism? Or is it all just smoke and mirrors?
I think the first thing we're looking at right now is a world of much more uncertainty. And if I just step back for a second, because we'll get to the challenges of trade, I think the last decade, I was sitting here in the first row, and we were at a worldwide BCG partner meeting here. I think our India team at that point was a little over 100 people. Now it's over 1,000 people. But we were talking about the world, and I was thinking about what's happened in the 10 years since then. And we've seen risk change fundamentally on 4 dimensions over that decade. We've seen risk in a macroeconomic sense, obviously, with what happened in the great financial crisis less than a year later. We've seen it in cybersecurity and the uncertainties we feel that is at a different level for most companies and individuals. We've seen it in pandemics and the health risks that exist today from superbugs and other things that we need to consider in ways we didn't before. And to your last point, we see it in a geopolitical environment that feels much less stable and much more uncertain than it did before. And it's easy to step back. I want to get to the opportunities in a second because it's easy to miss that. But it's easy to sort of look at this in a short-term environment and just pick on one issue or another. But I think fundamentally we have to deal as CEOs in a different risk framework than the risk framework we dealt with, not so many years ago. I think right now, I don't think it's destiny at all that we'll end up in a protectionist environment. I think the administration, I happened to hear Secretary Ross, the new Commerce Secretary, speak about 10 days ago, specifically talking about this issue, is from the United States' point of view, the new administration, President Trump, I think has clear through several of his leaders, Secretary Mnuchin, Secretary Ross, have talked about wanting to expand trade and to continue to evolve trade, but to do it on a different basis. They perceive that the basis that the United States has negotiated on in the past, when the world was at a different place, wasn't balanced, and they want to get to balanced trade. But in order to get there, they believe they need to have a bit of a stick as well as a carrot, and the stick is if they can't get there, they're prepared to take more aggressive action. But I don't think that's the intent or the desire to end up in that place, and I think their hope is by willingness to be clear up front that they're going to take a tough view on trade, that they hope that that will lead to negotiations that can avoid that and get to a world that improves trade.
Right. They want to expand trade. David, if I could come to you on this. Brexit hit Britain. He's talking about free trade. Donald Trump is also talking about free trade, though he's saying fair trade. And as Rick said, there's a stick along with the carrot, and they will really want to expand trade. Is that what we are actually going to get into now?
I think we have to pause for a minute. We have had some shocks in the last year which have definitely challenged globalization and challenged free trade. But if we look back over the last 20 years, we've had huge benefits from globalization and free trade, and the estimates are many, many hundreds of millions of people around the world lifted out of poverty. Some say as much as 1.5 billion. On the other side, we've had products, innovation, services, food delivered to billions of people around the world at a much lower cost and with much greater satisfaction relative to income levels than we've ever had in the past. So a lot of that we take for granted, but I think we need to sort of pinch ourselves and remind ourselves of the huge benefits that free trade and globalization has brought. Now, maybe getting closer to your question, technology has rolled on very fast. The Internet of Things, that's all enabled free trade, but it has meant that some people have felt left behind. Now, there's two options on that. One, you say, well, let's stop technology. Let's stop the development of the internet. Let's stop product innovation, robotics, and so on. But, we've tried that through the centuries. It's a bad thing. It lessens the benefits for mankind. But right back to the Industrial Revolution in Europe, we tried that. It didn't work. So that's not an option. The second option is probably for everybody to think hard about those who have been left behind by technological advance. And I think that is a challenge for governments and for the corporate sector to stand in and fill some of that gap and to reskill. And there's some great examples of that around the world. I would like to see us do more to look at those examples. That was part of the issue in Brexit.
Professor Feldstein, if I can ask you, and if I can, probably, you've written extensively about Donald Trump's trade policies, and you have also commented on it, and perhaps more than anybody else, you know the mind of the man, so to say. What do you think, sir, is really going to happen? Is there going to be a greater push towards liberalization and globalization, but in a different form?
So my sense is that there's still debate within the senior parts of the Trump administration, but I think in the end, we're not going to move to closing markets. We're not going to move to trying to destroy globalization. I think that there is a desire to open markets, to increase our U.S. exports to other countries. The business community is very much behind the globalization process. We see it not just in terms of what we import and what we export, but the fact that there are global links in the production process. So components are imported, the products into which they're embodied are re-exported, and we can't bring that to a halt. And I think that's why, as we move forward, we're going to see a strengthening of that process rather than a destruction of it.
Mr. Anil Agarwal, if I could come to you, sir, do you think the whole issue about globalization has been, done too aggressively, and the rhetoric has gone to another extreme, and now we just need to kind of come back, pull back, take a deep breath, calm down, and look at issues as they are? What do you have to say, sir?
India is a very different situation. According to me, is a different orbit. If you look at the opportunity, if you look at the whole world, 1.3 billion people in China, 1.3 billion people in India, 1.3 billion people in Africa. What left? This is the continent 3 is going to grow. And the other part, which you talk about globalization, is to service this continent. So I am very focused on natural resource, which is a very global, very, very important. As far as India is concerned, India import 85% of oil, most of the gold, most of the silver, fertilizer, copper, almost $500 billion import. Today's technology, India, if you compare with the China, we have almost have a production with the same geology, 1/10 of production. 1/10 of the production what China produce. It is a tremendous opportunity for the anywhere in the world. When I'm sitting the overseas, I realize the opportunity with this government, with this position. People are sitting on the fence till the last year. This year, they all are here to invest money into India. So I'm very focused looking at 3 parts. One is infrastructure. I heard our infrastructure minister talk about almost couple of $1 trillion to be invested into the infrastructure. That will change the country and bring tremendous opportunity for the entrepreneur. Number 2, natural resource. We have pool of hydrocarbon, we have pool of natural resource. On the base of that, the startup, the SMEs, thousands of SMEs. Today's, if you take up the automobile, one car will need almost 600 kilo of aluminum, and which will require at least 200 industry to build those parts. And tremendous opportunity to build this startup, build this SMEs.
Mr. Rana Kapoor, if I could come to you, sir. Forget about global trade wars and what's happening in Europe and what Mr. Trump is trying to do. Indian businessmen should invest and keep investing so that you meet the unmet demand in this country. Is that what you think is likely to happen? And is that what you're seeing also in the marketplace?
All I can tell you is that the global ideologies, I think that's the mainstream question.
Right.
The ideologies are changing. When the ideologies change, there is an underlying economic revolution. You have to understand what happens. The tectonic blades of the global economy change. What does that mean? It means to me what is happening is that the MNCs are taking a little bit of a rest. The new age MNCs, what we call mega scale MNCs, are taking a head start. And then the more micro, small, medium MSCs are also working in the right direction. So the fact of the matter is that there is a tectonic shift happening in the economy, global economy, but what underlines that tectonic shift, which you cannot through protectionism and through home country economics, you can't change. are two things. Consumption. Number one, consumption, and I'll give you data points. The consumption out of 4.2 billion population on a base of 7.9 billion in the world is happening largely in 36% of the economy, which is the emerging economies. The MNC slowdown has been so drastic. Its last FDI investments and their overall investments in emerging economies and their market share has been receding. And home country companies, whether it's with the life sciences genius like Ajay Piramal, whether it's a metals genius like Anil Agarwal on this dais, and many others on this, on the stage, the fact of the matter is that the tectonic plates of the economy are changing more into home country economies. So what is relevant today is interconnectedness that you can't change. You cannot change because the consumption is happening in other countries and the supply is in other countries. So you have no choice but to interconnect.
You have no choice but to interconnect, so that means more trade and more investment in probably emerging economies. One man who actually knows how to take the battle to MNCs, Mr. Ajay Piramal. Mr. Piramal, we've seen the private capex investment figures, which comes out every quarter, and the latest figures are not looking very good. There is a problem in corporate India when it comes to big ticket investment. The small investments keep happening. How do you think this problem can be addressed, sir? And how soon can it be addressed?
I think when we look at the problems of investment, we must appreciate that in the previous years, I think from 2008 to for the next 4 or 5 years, we put up a lot of investment which actually has turned unproductive. So if you look at the investments that were done, let's say in the power sector and all, most of them have not even been fructified. And this overhang is creating a big issue with banks. I think Rana in his address also spoke about it. And unless we solve the problem of the non-performing assets, I see that we are in for some big issue. And just to make a point, if you look at it, the share of the public sector banks actually is going down. They are showing negative growth rates, whilst all the private sector banks are in a very happy position. So I think we need to solve that. The second thing is, of course, that government investment or the public sector investment is going up. I think more has to be done because people have been, most of the people who did the large projects in the past have been bitten so badly that there's a lack of confidence. I think that confidence needs to come back. And that is a challenge, and we need to actually deal with that.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you, audience.